Welcome to Simplilearn. Welcome to Return of Value, unearthing the real value of ITIL in enterprises. My name is Martin Stufi and I'm your moderator, and also I'll be mostly in the background helping Sami just so that everything goes smoothly. And after that, I should say that we have our trainer who will be conducting this webinar as a return of value, unearthing the real value of ITIL in enterprises, and his name is Samit Jha. And in order to improve our services, every feedback is essential, and we request you all to please take up, okay, good, thank you, Nabi, to take up the survey and provide feedback at the end of this webinar through the polling activity. Now, let me come to our trainer, and I'm proud to introduce Samit as a guru who will conduct this webinar, as I said, as a return of value, unearthing the real value of ITIL in enterprises. Yes, hello, Faizan. And Samit Jha is Associate Director, Business Development, CIS Cognizant Technology Solutions. He's an author and thought leader and an expert in IT strategy and transformation. Has delivered over 50 service management consulting assignments for various banking, finance, telco, and the media customers across the globe. And now, just to come to the last part, at the end of this session, we will have a 15 minutes question and answer time. In these 15 minutes Q&A time, we will cover as many questions as we can that weren't already covered during this session. And if you are here something is from brilliant, interesting, insightful, and you want to share in your social channel, whatever your social channel are, Facebook or LinkedIn tweet, you can use the hashtag SLWebinars. That way people can find it, and you'll make them wish they were here. You didn't come, guys, to listen to me, and I'm proud now to do the handover to Samit, who will be your host, as I said. And the name of this webinar is Return of Value, unearthing the real value of ITIL in enterprises. Go ahead and sit back, relax, have a cup of coffee, and thank you for your attending, and happy Simply Learning. Good morning, Samit. Are you there? Are you with us? Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, Martin.
Okay, now you should go ahead, please, and just few sentences before you started. We know that IT has big responsibilities, and IT enables the business to meet its goals and adapting quickly to changing needs or minimizing cost and complexity. And we know that the business challenges is increasing business performance and improving ROI or RoV. And I'm really glad to know and hear today's webinar by you as a guru. And welcome to today's webinar. And please go ahead, Samit. Okay, I will be in the background.
Thank you, Martin. So, hello, everyone. This session is based on one of the key concepts that we basically, myself and my co-author Rakesh, had introduced in a book, Making CIOM Work, Adopting Service Integration and Management for Your Business. Thus, you would often find quite a bit of references to this book during this session. The way I have sectioned this entire session is based on the agenda. Like, we could cover the current perception that the industry has, and going into how IT projects its value currently. Then we'll get to the concept of return on value, and then the last part would cover on how you can adopt ROE in your organization. So the perception. The challenge for CIOs have been never this extreme. If you see, the pressure from business has constantly been building, and especially with the digital age, this challenging situation has further perplexed the CIOs. They need to have the right strategy for social, mobile, analytics, and cloud technologies in order to aptly support the digital transformation the businesses are going through. During one of the quick takes from CIOs, CIO.com tried to get their thoughts on how do you communicate the value of IT to the business. So this was a question they asked to the couple of CIOs. And some of the key observations from the response is what has been captured in this slide. So CIOs feel that the role of IT has evolved from transactional department to a strategic one. Now, mind you, these are basically the quotes from the CIOs who are rated as the successful ones in the industry today. So communicating the value of IT systems is critical. So they really realize that it is extremely important that the value of IT is effectively communicated to the business. And that too in terms of all the systems, processes, and solutions which IT use to provide services to the business. They need to provide extended value to the customers beyond technology, especially if you see from the business perspective. They really do not really understand what technology means. For them, it is what the customer are looking forward for, that business, that the IT should be talking beyond technology. Because for IT, it's not simply the business. It is the end customers as well who has to be really satisfied with the business services. And all of this is what really is making the CIO's life difficult today, because all of this has to be effectively articulated to the business. Now, another thing which CIOs are looking forward for is that IT has to be established as a trusted business partner for the business. So these are some of the key points which has been observed from the CIO.com questionnaire. Now, another research, here again I'm referring to MIT Sloan research. Here, if you see, traditionally, business has viewed IT as a cost center. Now, though IT generates value for the business, but this aspect of IT has never really been visible to the business. This has, again, for long been one of the key challenges for every CIO. During the survey conducted by MIT Sloan, one of the Fortune 500 companies CIO stated, the business just doesn't understand that information technology organizations support the business processes that they drive. The business defines the business processes, IT enables the processes leveraging information technology. Again, on a very similar note, during one of my consulting engagements, one of the CIOs told me that his problem was that business does not see any value in their IT organization. They opined that business ran on their business processes and IT just played a supporting role. They felt that IT was not critical for running these business processes. They were not able to relate the IT services to their business services and processes, thus never realizing that IT is the key enabler for their business. In the same organization, when I interacted with the CEO, he stated that their IT is a capital consumer and not a value creator. So this is a perception which I have found in quite a few organizations which business has towards their IT. So following observations have been taken from MIT Sloan research. Now, as we go through these observations, let us try to relate how commonly you have experienced these statements and also how we can use it to identify the ways in which we can communicate the value our IT team brings to business. Now, one of the key points highlighted was that many organizations are experiencing a crisis in confidence in their information system functions. And especially, this is on the aspect of the CIOs who lead them. So another area where really IT is not being able to build their confidence in business. Now, CEOs often don't know how to really evaluate IT's functions performance, and thus that of the CIO. Even one CEO mentioned that they find it difficult to really evaluate the performance of information systems and the CIO's contribution. Now, one of the CEOs, who was a born skeptic, mentioned that he doesn't trust stories of IT-based competitive advantage, and he thinks IT doesn't apply to his industry. Now, why is this happening? Because all these CEOs have never really been able to understand or visualize the value which IT has provided the business with. Now, the culprit is not the CIOs, the culprit is the IT, because we have not really been able to showcase what we actually do for our business. Now, another statement which came out from this research, a CIO believes that IT budget should not be subject to the same disciplines as the rest of the business. Now here, again, it's a CIO's perception that you should not be treated at par with the business, but it's good to have that perception, but then you need to communicate the value, build the trust, and thus claim for those allocations in the entirely budgetary decisions of the organization. Now, there's only a couple of CEOs who belong to the different team where they really saw IT as the enabler and value creator for them. Now, these CEOs have, it has been observed that typically when they move, they have been taking along the CIO with them. So the CIO, this particular set of CEOs believe that IT can enable new and smarter ways of doing business, and that the CIOs and the IS function in general should therefore be actively brought into the business team. Now, this is the situation where IT has really been able to communicate the worth, the value they bring to the business. And this is where exactly every IT organization wants them to see, and not definitely in the first 5 examples, statements we have seen here. Now, we will go to a survey. I'll request Matthew to start the survey, please. Matthew, can you start the survey, please?
Yes, Amit.
So what we need to do here is we want to know that what metrics business use to measure value. And the purpose of the survey is to really gauge at how many of us really understand these metrics completely. So the answers are accordingly like whether if you know that very well that what metrics business use to measure value which your team provides to them, then your answer should be, I know that completely. If you have a decent idea of that, then you should be going for a good idea. If you are not very sure, then the third option, and if you're completely unaware, then the fourth option.
Okay, guys, I would like you to provide us response on the chat windows. Hello, guys. Okay, please help us and provide answers on your chatting windows. Belal, Faizan, Jivan, Kumar, Manjunath, Milind, Nikhil, Nishant, please go ahead and provide us response to the chatting windows. Priyanka, Ravi, Samir, Shivanand, Suresh, Vijay. Okay, thank you guys. Okay, please, all of you, if you're able to provide us response and share your opinion referring to this survey number 1. Okay. Okay, thank you, Samit. I think that we have response in the chatting windows from them, and probably you should go and continue with the webinar. Samit, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think that we have responses from our guys here, and you should go ahead.
Now, the next survey is on, are your metrics really aligned to the business values metrics?
Okay, hope that our guys, we have the same thing. Just provide us and share your opinion referring to survey number 2, as we have these options. Are your metrics aligned to business's value metrics? We have 4 options. Please share and provide your responses referring to that. Thank you, guys. Okay, Samit, I think that we have responses from them, or most of them share with us their opinion. You should go, please.
So now, if I see the survey, predominantly most of us, the response that I've got, most of us are not really sure that what metrics does business really consider to value what IT has provided to them. Now, this is a common trend. It's not that most of us here doesn't realize this, but this is the problem with each of us in the IT space, that we really talk in a technical jargon. We use those technical jargons to communicate with the business, and unfortunately, these are some things which business does not really understand. So we will cover this more in detail in the corresponding slides. So now, some of the key reasons why business does not really see the value of IT. So let us understand these reasons. Now, one of the key reasons is that business executives are not able to align the IT cost to their business services. So when for every business unit, a certain cost is deducted from them towards IT services which they consume. Now, the common perception with each of these business unit heads is that they're just paying IT, but not sure for what. Just set of systems and the things which IT is providing to them. They are not able to really relate it to their business services. So unless and until the mapping happens with the business services to the IT services which these BUs consume, it's very difficult for them to align the business outcomes to the IT cost which they are paying. Second key reason is the inability of IT organization to communicate value in the business terms. So just like I mentioned earlier, if we say that a certain server has been improved, its reliability has been improved, uptime has been improved, in many situations it does not make any sense to the business. So though in the best case scenario, we are able to communicate some value which IT has created for the business, but not in the language which business really understands. Third critical point here is that business is unable to apprehend value that IT generates. Now, since they do not relate to these services, they are not really able to apprehend and appreciate the value which IT provides to them. IT communications constitute of tech jargons, we covered that. IT initiatives are not linked to business outcomes. So even a lot of initiatives that we take within our IT organization, whether that is a simple service improvement plan or a major change that we are bringing through, improving our processes, improving our systems. But unfortunately, these does not really relate to the business. For them, they are not able to really relate the outcomes which each of these initiatives provides to the business services or the services which they actually consume. Now, last critical point here is that value of system processes or solutions are not aptly communicated to the business. Now, although in some cases we are able to communicate what value IT has brought forth, but those with respect to systems, processes, solutions, that linkage again never happens. So value communication is the key problem because of which business does not really see the value that IT brings forth to them. So let us see how IT projects its value. Can we go through this example and provide the value which you perceive IT has created for the business? The case is that an IT organization has instituted proactive problem management. They did the trend analysis based on which the problem manager identified a certain trend in the occurrence of a set of incidents. The root cause analysis of this proactively created problem ticket resulted in identification of an issue which was related to a server that was hosting a critical business application. Now, as part of the corrective and preventive action, they were able to improve the uptime of the services by additional certain percentage. So what value has this initiative created for the business? I would be looking forward for your answers, friends here. Just a few 30 seconds for this, and let's see what we all have to say regarding the value that IT has created for business.
Okay, I hope that we should come with a response and share your opinion with our trainer, and I will go and try to read the responses from you guys. Just go ahead and type in chatting windows. What value has this initiative created for the business? Okay, we have are you able to see responses, Samit? I'm going to read the responses from some attendees. Please confirm me, Samit.
Yeah, I just see a response from Jeevan. Value more availability, more opportunity for business to be productive thereby. Jeevan says increasing investment as well. Any other, sorry, not investment. Okay, fine, Jeevan, thanks. Milind mentioned negligible value since additional uptime is only 0.1%. Manju says availability percentage of business service increases. So, okay. Kumar says that need the past and new uptime, absolute percentage figures. IT in this instance would have created value for the business only if the metrics agreed was met. Jeevan says, I meant producing more products in case of manufacturing. And Bilal says that overall, there's an increase in the dependability of business organizations' business service to the customers. Fine, thanks everyone. So we will be visiting this example after covering certain concepts again. Another comment from Dwarkanath. Convert the percentage into time, which in turn helps us to calculate the downtime. Suresh says, however, it is not clear. It is increased from 99.99 to 0.1%. Nishan says additional uptime means less incidents and less service disruption for this critical business application. Fine, thank you, folks. So before I proceed further, I would like to really cover some more points. We have been talking about IT constantly and how does ITIL really relate to our context. So my question is, why service management, ITSM or ITIL, and how can that drive the value of IT? So ITSM, you see, is completely cross-functional in nature. It is the only function that sees the services in a complete sense. ITSM SMEs or roles are most capable in the organization to understand and communicate the criticality of business processes and services internally as well as externally, that means to the business. So they can communicate the criticality and importance of IT services to our customers, that means the business. In an ideal world, I would like to see service management function as the intermediary layer between business and IT organization. And in one of the research, it was said that service management professionals are the best suited to drive service level automations across the domains. So success of ITIL initiative is thus directly dependent on the proportion and directly proportional to the contribution of every IT team that has been made to the initiative. Thus, value of these initiatives, if effectively communicated to business, would mean that IT's values has been communicated successfully. Thus, though henceforth I may be focusing on ITIL, its relevance extends to the entire IT organization. The outcome of any ITIL initiative will either be a gain or loss. So gain are the typical outcomes that have positive impact on the organization. Now, these may be improvement in adherence, uptime, and so on. Whereas the impacts which are negative, the outcomes that have resulted in negative impact, are the loss. So, example could be degradation in the quality of the service, increase in the downtime, and so on. So, the outcome is measured in the base unit of the parameter improved or is completely subjective at times. Like if you see the point which Jeevan mentioned, that it would lead to an increased manufacturing output. So how does that relate to that particular output? It could be subjective. So we will get into more of these details when we get into the concept of RoV. Now, typically, when we try to communicate these gains or loss, it is done in terms of percentage or financial value or some other base parameters. But most of these outcomes are very difficult to be quantified. So let us try to understand the type of returns which are there. So the returns could be tangible or it could be intangible. So tangible return is what I say that can be directly quantified in financial terms. So I can directly say that yes, this is the financial gain that has happened out of it. And those that cannot be directly converted into or directly quantified in financial terms is what I call as an intangible return. It would be mostly subjective, and it may result in any of the outcomes. That may result in intangible or indirect gains over a period of time. So intangible outcome right now, and intangible gain right now, may eventually lead to tangible gains, but it would be over a period of time. Now, intangible gains are also significantly driven by perception. So this is where, when articulating the intangible values, it becomes really critical that how do you really address that perception. So for IT, if you see, most of the benefits are intangible, and this is why it is very difficult to represent the value it brings forth to the business. Now, we found that the concept of tangible and intangible itself was slightly confusing because some of the gains like uptime can be related to the benefits. And that may eventually be quantified in financial terms. So how do I say whether it's tangible or intangible? So for me, the very confusion when trying to identify the outcome of an initiative is when we get lost into identifying what is tangible and what is intangible. And this is a major reason where the IT value articulation becomes a challenging ask for the team members. So we wanted to keep the understanding of these returns very simple, and thus the specific definitions are what we have used to introduce them. This is extremely critical for us to relate the value we have really gained from our initiative. So how do we really convert intangible into tangible? So let us understand this. So when we try to identify the outcomes of any initiative, the resultant gains would be direct or indirect. So for each gain, we need to associate the opportunity cost of not doing, or maybe the gain which has happened directly because of this. So the associated result, whatever result financial valuations that we have got, we need to associate that to the outcome. So we attribute the impact of the initiative to this particular gain, and then eventually we calculate the resultant financial benefit, which is quite easy for our uptime type of initiative, uptime improvement type of initiative. But not all intangible benefits can be easily be converted into tangible values. Gains at operational levels can be easily related to financial gains, while others could be more subjective and complex to convert, and especially when the gain has an indirect impact on a different perspective altogether, those value articulation there becomes difficult. So we would again go back to our example and say that if the opportunity loss due to unavailability of the service is 10,000 USD per minute, then what value has this initiative created for the business? So now, so basically this example now, going back to it, the purpose is to see that whether with this information has the perspective of the value that has been generated, has that changed for you? So can you just do a quick calculation here? we will just see this calculation. So when you say opportunity cost is 10,000 USD per minute, uptime gain is 0.1% per year. So if you try to relate this, 0.1% uptime gain would translate into certain minutes. And when you multiply that with the opportunity cost, what you get is the value which you have created for the business in terms of enabling that opportunity to go through. So you have prevented the opportunity loss, and thus you have what you have done is you have gained that opportunity or earned that opportunity for the business. So here you have been able to bring value of 5.256 million USD annually for the business. Now, my question would be that is this the only value that this initiative has brought to the business? So, who are the direct or indirect beneficiaries of the outcome from our initiative? So, for any of the initiatives, if we see, the value is what is eventually being received by it could lead to some strategy change affecting your strategic layer. It could lead to improvement of your services, which may be IT or business services, be it IT or business layer. It would have a direct impact on certain aspects of the company, the business itself, the quality of the business services or the IT services, the excellence, your customer satisfaction, to your individual team. So all of these perspectives, or all of these stakeholders basically, are the direct or indirect beneficiaries of your outcome. Thus, it is very important for us that each of these stakeholders understands the value that we have brought to them. So it is critical that we listen to what our customers, that is our business, wants to hear, not what we want to tell them. Right? Typically, when we try to communicate to them, we try to communicate what we want to tell them, not what they really want to hear. And this is where that communication gap arises. They're not really able to apprehend what we are telling them. So now I will introduce you to the concept of return of value. We have used this concept to demonstrate the benefits of SIAM initiatives to the business in our book, Making SIAM Work, and this is where we introduce this concept. I've also used this to help one of my customers, the earlier CIO example that I have given, to transform the perception of their business and appreciate the value that IT created for them. So they were able to effectively use this concept to effectively communicate to the business, and the perception of the business completely changed from basically a consumer of just cost, a drain for the cost for business, to the real value generator. So I would like to recall a quote from one of the CIOs. And if you see Rebecca Jacobi, who was the CIO of Cisco, way back in 2012, she mentioned that improving the value of services is all about how effectively you are able to understand what business wants to accomplish, and then express that outcomes in the business terms, which everyone in the business can understand. It is not really about the technology of the service, but the value that the service provides to the business. And this is precisely what our concepts of RoV try to address. So let me unwind and answer the question that you would likely be having, that what is RoV? So RoV, if we see the concept of RoI had always been on the return on investment, so typically in terms of the financial values. And the intangible benefits were not really realized. And ROI time period was certain. And a lot of those outcomes which had been intangible was not really being effectively communicated to the business. Those conversions really didn't happen to the extent it should really be. And thus, ROI, I feel, has been really a failure for IT to really communicate how effectively we have created value for the business. So return on value, that it reflects both tangible as well as intangible benefits. It drives revenue over time. So especially when we see those intangible benefits and they're resulting in tangible benefits over time. So that is where RoV drives revenue over time. And it can be used to value the investments from multiple perspectives. What these perspectives are, you will see in the next slide. But RoV highlights the RoV along with other intangible values or benefits that an initiative would result in. So you can say RoV is RoI plus a lot of other outcomes which your initiative provides to the business. So now I'd like to explain the various perspectives of RoV. Now, the first one being the business perspective. So typically, business perspective would reflect value generated by factors that impact business, customers' image, or customers' perception in any way. So the value creation that happens here is typically in terms of market share, brand value, customers' perception of business services, regulatory adherence, and so on. The second perspective is the strategic perspective. So strategic perspective reflects value generated by factors that impact the strategic direction of the organization. Now, strategic direction, the strategic perspective is significantly influenced by business perspective. And thus, both business and strategic perspectives are very tightly coupled. So value creation here typically happens in terms of the strategic advantage that the organization gains, compliance, etc. The third perspective is the service perspective. So service perspective reflects value generated by factors that impact the services. So it could be service performance, reliability, availability, etc. The fourth perspective is the process perspective. Process perspective reflects value generated by factors that impact the process. So it could be related to your process KPIs, which we come across quite frequently. It could be in terms of the value generated through governance, control, and so on. The fifth perspective is the operational perspective. So it reflects value generated by factors which are basically influencing operational aspects. So here the outcomes would be in terms of efficiency, productivity, cost of failures, and so on. The last perspective is people. So a people perspective reflects value that is generated by factors that influence the people aspects of the organization. So this could be skill, knowledge, culture, and so on. So any ITIL initiative will create value for at least one of these perspectives. This value can be measured and showcased by the value factors. Now, so if you see in this slide, the value factors across these perspectives that we have identified are competitive edge, time to market, optimization, compliance, and so on. Now, the initiative will trigger the source of value to generate the value for these value services. This source is what I call as value source. And the outcome that it produces is the value of your outcome. So if you see the competitive edge, the value source is time to market and better market position. So due to this, what would happen? The organization would have an increased revenue share. It would have a market leadership. So these are the values which this value source has created for the value factor. Same with time to market. If you see, it is more of quicker design and development of new business services or offerings, and that is what would lead to the creation of this value factor. So what would be the result be? The result typically is your increased market share. Your organization is recognized as forerunner. Organization is recognized as an innovator, and so on. Now, if you see each of these values, host of them, it is very difficult to directly attribute to the tangible benefit which the outcome would lead to. If because of your initiative you are recognized as an innovator, down the line you might have certain IP that you have created. They may result in financial gains, but immediate period. If it's for 3 years, it might happen that that patent has given you a return after 5 years. Or your innovator, recognition as an innovator in the market space, leading to increasing your market share. So that is how eventually the market transformation would happen for you. So it is really difficult to link the degree of gain to these intangible benefits at times. Same way for optimization. Again, if you see here, we're talking about a new concept called as TCC. So, excuse me. So, again, these value factors and the value they generate along with the way we are going to measure is very critical. Now, if you see TCC here, it is another concept that we had introduced in our bookmaking sandbox. I will not get into the detail of it right now, but for generic understanding, it is a replacement of the concept of TCO, or total cost of ownership, in the subscription-based service era. So now we would be using this set of concept in our example. But before we do that, we need to understand that these value factors and the value they generate along is what is going to really measure and report the value that has been discussed and agreed with the business. So all of these parameters ideally should be agreed with the business. So that is where you try to set the perception right, that on what basis the reporting or measurement would happen. So this is a critical activity, since by doing this, not only do we listen to what business wants, but also set the correct expectations with them. So when we are defining or agreeing with the business on what we are going to report, what we are going to measure, how we are going to report a value on, all of these value factors has to be agreed along with the value. And then the reporting would happen based on each of those value parameters. So we will see more that in detail in the next couple of slides. So again, going back to our example, what value has this initiative created for the business? Now, if we see here, it has helped in competitive edge because with better market position, because due to your increased in uptime, there is an increased revenue, and this is how your value source of better market position has helped you to transform that value or realize that value. From optimization perspective, since now you have performed a corrective action, preventive action, which would mean that your downtime for the service has decreased, that would also mean that your TCO or TCC has reduced, because now your maintenance cost for that is going to come down. Improved serviceability of additional uptime of 0.1% is there. Now, from customer experience management perspective, since customers are not having a failed transaction there, they are able to access your services properly, it would lead to improved customer satisfaction levels. Now, this can be calculated based on customer service, and you need to map it to a particular initiative. So how effectively the service is designed would really be responsible for a proper articulation here. Reduce customer complaints, because now the uptime is there, so can be directly be calculated based on the ticket reduction of related incidents and service calls. Improved customer retention. Now this can be calculated based on the repeat transactions from the customer. So if we are seeing an increase in repeat customer or the rate of repeat customer has increased after the particular initiative has happened, then definitely to a certain degree this increase can be directly be attributed to that particular initiative if no other initiatives has happened in parallel. So this is how we can attribute the realized value in every sense. Now, another important thing here, we are talking about a stakeholder value. So typically, your stakeholder or shareholder value would result only when their return on their shares increases. So if the company is able to convert more revenue, that would mean that better realization or profit margin has increased. So that would mean that your shareholder value would also increase. So who should showcase the value that IT generates? So value that any initiative generates is always realized at three layers, and this is from where a perspective has been derived. So strategic, tactical, and operational. So operational is where our internal suppliers and teams are there. So you would have these team members providing the value that each of them has been able to convert or realize to their team leads. And in turn, these team leads would be able to really be attribute the services which their particular technical towers or technical teams has provided to the overall IT services. So the contribution to each of those services, they would be in a position to articulate. And then at the tactical level, this is where your delivery head comes in, they would be able to relate the outcomes from these IT services to the business service layer. So that's the strategic layer. So delivery head would accumulate the results from all the team leads and then create the dashboard for the CIO. So CIO would have the dashboard related to all the IT services and the way it contributes to business services, and then CIO would have to present this overall business dashboard to the business, and this is what we call as the business value dashboard. So let us see what that would mean. So we'll cover that in a couple of slides later, but right now let's try to really see that how we can really adopt RoV in our organizations. So critical thing is that there are challenges. So it's not really easy that we straight away adopt any new concept. So what are those challenges that exist in using RoV? So mindset that benefit exists only in dollar value. So this is a common mindset that most of our people have, and this would be one of the major challenges when we are trying to come out with these concepts. Getting value realization details from internal teams and supplier teams, because all of those people should be trained and be aware that how should they be projecting their value. Accumulating and projecting the relevant value parameters to distinct business stakeholders. So how would you really collate those and create the next level of dashboard for the next level? Now, apportioning the contribution of the initiative to overall gain. So wherever especially there are subjective gains and the gain factor may relate to some other gains, how are you really able to apportionate that? How are you really able to show that, yes, the increase in the sales has been due to this particular initiative? And this is where your involvement of business is really required. And definition of value driven by perception. So typically, in host of cases, value is driven by perception, and that is what we need to take care of through our engagement with the business. So how do we really address these? Because it's very important that we are able to handle these challenges. So we need to involve some of the key players, and that would be required for calculating the RoV in quantitative terms, especially when we're trying to relate something to the business and strategical perspectives of the market share, brand value, and so on. So calculate the RoV in quantitative terms. Convert intangible value into tangible value. So how do we really convert that? It has to be agreed with the business. Realize and highlight the gain post the closure of IT project or initiative. So yes, our IT initiative has closed, but its benefit realization for all those intangible gains would happen after a certain period of time. Ensure IT service systems, process, or solutions aptly linked. Link value realization of business services to IT services, and work with business to agree on the model that would be used to calculate and report value. So some of your key players to make RoE adoption success are your CXOs and BU heads, sales analysts and market research teams, strategic teams, BRMs, and your complete internal or external IT teams. Now, it is very important that you create the RoV mindset in the organization across all your teams. So the following questions, which is shown in the slide, is what will help your team member and enable them to start thinking from the RoV perspective for every activity they do to complete their day-to-day tasks. So they should know that what businesses they are supporting, how we are supporting that business, and what are those services that we are providing. I've seen that, unfortunately, at the team level, this insight really is not there. And that entire gap exists from the business services to the IT component side. And this is one of the main culprits to really show value to the customer. So why should business really appreciate your services? How your services would add value to the business? Now, how easy it is for the business to replace your service. So if it is easy, that would mean that it is even more essential for you to effectively communicate. So you have the replacement options either in the organization or outside the organization. What will happen if your services are unavailable to business? And how do business measure success and thus value of the services they consume? And this is what we relate to the listen part that we discussed earlier. So we need to remember the key, and these are that we identify that what business cares about, work with business and agree on the method and model to calculate and report value, align your metrics, enable measurement through tools, and evolve continually. So we should not do a big bang approach for this, have some decent roadmap created which can be achievable, and start reporting accordingly. So it is extremely critical for us to showcase the value of the next layer. And George's law of reporting says that as the length of the report increases, the odds of anyone reading it decreases. So our RoV report has to be short and sweet. This is where business value dashboards become a critical tool. A simple tool that I have used multiple times is what we are covering in this as well as the next slide. And again, this is based on the bookmaking SIAM work. You may use this or any other similar representation or any other representation which is deemed fit in your organization. But we need to produce such dashboard covering all elements of the value factors that we have agreed with the business and for all layers of your teams. So this is how you can, so I just taken a couple of those value factors and the value which has been generated and showing the status for that. So this goes to the business. And at the next layer, we have the RoV report, which now goes to, is given by, say, a problem management team, the software asset management team. They have given their value they have been able to generate. So for example, here in this case, we have considered that there was a license breach because of which penalty was imposed. So customer has incurred a cost there. So I have not really created value, but drained out the value. So you can use any of these reports. And finally, for any questions that you may have. I hope
okay.
Yeah.
Samir, thank you for this part of the presentation. It was really exciting and great. And now let me to open polling activity. And during the polling activity, I will ask our attendees to provide and share their opinions and provide their response on that. And during this time, quickly, I would like to open a few questions we had as I choose from our attendees, and probably you should go and quickly provide a response to that. Are you agree with me on that, Samit?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me to open polling activity, and guys, please provide us your response. Are you looking for a training provider for your team? And in the meantime, I would like to open one question from Dvarakanath. Can we have some example of converting intangible to tangible value? Could you provide us some quick examples, Samit, even that we are running a little bit over the time? Okay.
Yeah, so
you already covered, but just quickly.
Yeah, so like the example that we covered here was 0.1% uptime. So how does it really translate into business value? So when we see that, say, a gain of 5K is there per hour, so we convert the uptime gain into that particular time period, multiply by the opportunity cost, and that gives me my tangible gain. So I've been able to convert one of the intangible values into tangible values. Now, it becomes difficult when you try to relate into the business side of things, and that is where we need involvement of the business, because relating an initiative to an increase in market share, because, for example, if this was a banking transaction and your transaction has increased, so your sales on your portal has happened. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Another question, please, from Kumar, and he asked actually and said, please share an email with TCC and TCO definitional calculation unit of measurement. Could you quickly, let's say, provide some response on TCC and TCO, even that you cover this part? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So TCO, like we understand, is basically for all the assets that an organization holds. Like, so right from the time when you bought the particular asset to the time when you eventually need support for that. So all of those costs for the entire life cycle of the asset is what is attributed as TCO. Now, when in a subscription world, when you're consuming the services, this concept does not really work. So it's based now on the cost of consumption, because based on a certain migration initiative that you've done to move to a subscription model, you may have some other costs attached to it, which may be a migration cost or sustenance cost or maintenance cost and so on. So you need to convert all of those and for the life cycle of your subscription of the service, and then arrive at a TCC. So those are covered in detail in the book.
Okay, I would like to ask you, our attendees, just to finish this polling activity, and let's say very last question, even that we have another question summit. Obviously that everything is pretty interesting for our attendees, and the question from G1 is, would you have a matrix sample of a value delivered to business, matrix goals achievements, correlating to IT metrics?
Would you have matrix sample of value delivered to business metrics, goal achievement correlated to IT metrics? Yeah, so this is where, Jeevan, if you see this particular slide, yeah. So here, now this is completely for the business dashboard. Now, if I go to the next layer, say if your team is driving proactive problem management and you are one of the problem managers, you would create some one report like this, which has to be then accumulated and collated together by the next level. So we are able to relate those. So when you convert those gains, which you have been able to realize, typically your problem management would lead to incident reduction, uptime, and so on. So because incident reduction would mean a gain in uptime. So that is where you need to work with the business to understand that what is the opportunity cost for them for the services that are impacted. Now, because of what you have done, it may be possible that 10 different services has gained in terms of the performance, gained in terms of the additional transactions. So you need to really convert those, understand what the opportunity cost for each of those services are, and then attribute that to the gain in uptime.
Okay, Samit, I think that we covered the question as we had, and as I said, now we are a little bit over the time, and thank you for the great presentation, and thank you to our attendees that they came today on this great webinar. Stay with us, and happy simple learning. Thank you, Samit, and goodbye to all of you guys.